Om Sarvadharmastapakastvam Sarvadharmaswarupakaha Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. Om Stapakaya Chatharmasya Sarvadharmaswarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om peace, peace, peace. Welcome. Nice large gathering here inside the walls of our ashram in Hawaii on the Big Island, a little town called Honoka'a, far, far out in the middle of the Ganga Pacifica. That is our sacred ocean, our sacred water that surrounds us for several thousand miles on all sides. We're surrounded by sagara in Sanskrit. Unfortunately, unless you have the eye to see it, the single eye to see it, it's not the Ananda Sagara we're looking at out our windows, the ocean of bliss. That's reserved for an inner vision only. But for most of us here, I hope for all of us here, and I hope for our whole island and for our whole world, we're at least seeing the Shanti Sagara, the ocean of peace. And definitely not the Samsara Sagara, the ocean of suffering, rounds of birth and death in ignorance of our true nature. And it's that true nature which is the main and capital subject of the Vedanta. And that's what we do inside of this walls. We create a sanctified and holy atmosphere. And we hold it with puja, which we did last night. That is sacred ceremony and ritual done in that spirit of oneness, Advaita. And we also gather quite often for satsang, as we did this morning, if many of you were with us. And we also gather for meditation, which we also did this morning. And then we try and serve God in mankind. Yes, it could be said you're serving mankind, but it's better to think of it as serving God in mankind, because only God exists. Only Brahman exists according to the Vedanta. And that's going to be a very high station to reach mentally, intellectually, and beyond intellectually, spiritually. But nevertheless, it's the fact. And Vedanta likes to conclude with that. It likes to say, Vedanta Siddhanta Niruktiresha Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jagadcha. You know that one yet? Mm-hmm. Akanda Rupa Stiti Reva Moksha Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. That is the final and certain conclusion of the Vedanta, that all is Brahman. So, how to make thine eye single in order to see that most singular and indivisible Brahman everywhere is the main purpose of what we do inside the walls of this ashram, and all our ashrams in SRV on the West Coast too, by the way, which we'll be attending weekend after next, and you'll be watching us live stream there in San Francisco and in Portland, Oregon. And also at the Wind River Retreat up the Columbia River Gorge, very nice setting on some old Indian land. There will be meeting to discuss and study Zen Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta. I'm calling it White Crane, White Swan. Those are the two symbolic birds of each of those traditions. It's also the title of a book that I'm writing. So we'll see the non-dual aspects of those. Somebody said, "Oh, you're going to compare Advaita Vedanta to Zen Buddhism." I said, "No, not till the very end of the retreat. We're going to take one day and study the Zen Buddhism from its non-duality, and then we'll take one day and study the Advaita Vedanta. Then on the final day of the retreat, we'll put those two side by side, not so much to compare, but to see the points in which they agree. As there's been enough contention between religions, it's about time that we see some of the main understanding between them and focus on that and bring that out. So that also is what we like to do. It's called making connections, or connecting the dots, or following the trail of breadcrumbs back inside of yourself to find those kingdoms of heaven that great beings like Jesus talked about. So they must be there if these great beings who are not only truthful, they're incapable of lying. There's a difference in those two statements. So if a person who's attached to truth says nothing but truth, and they say something like that, then you can pretty much base your spiritual search on those truths. Or if you want to bring it into contemporary times, you can bank on it. And you begin to search deeply inside for those territories inside of you, which are yours. You need to claim them. And that's what we do every time we meet for a class. We begin to hear about and lay claim to those things which are beneficial to us and let go of those things which are detrimental. So to attach and detach at will, as my teacher said. First you hear the teaching detachment, vairagyam, and then you say, well, that's good, I've achieved that. And then after that, you learn how to detach and then attach at will to things like the world, the body, cherished objects, and philosophical realizations. As we were saying this morning, there has to be an end of knowledge in truth. Well, that's a far cry until you get rid of the end of ignorance and knowledge. And then you can get rid of the end of knowledge and truth. You can, as Krishna says in the Gita. So working on our ignorance, that particularly that primal kind of ignorance, mula vidya they call it. Mula means root. It's quite often in our ashrams in SRV we found that the shrine room is best in the basement. So we either remake a basement or it's already set up for us, and so we call those mula ashrams. You see, the shrine is in the basement, like at the very foundation, radiating up, like the Muladhara chakra at the base of your spine, has a lot of power in it. It's definitely true. It has a lot of poison in it too. This is why you want to awaken her and send her up to the higher centers. She wants to meet with Shiva at the top of her head, at the top of the head, that is in the crown, the marvelous human body, as it's called. So the marvelous human body is a template or a symbol for divinity. We have to start seeing it that way, treating each other that way. And then we'll come to find that there is no God in this universe except the one walking around on two legs. And then after that we'll find out that the body and the two legs are not God. That's just a house for it. That's the divine temple. That's where we are cut in the image, but we haven't found the actual essence of the image yet. It's a container for something else. First we think it's prana, but then when someone comes along and tells us, man doesn't live by bread alone, it must be something else I'm living by. And then we think it's thought. We live by our thoughts. And somebody comes along and says, yes, but there's this thing called intelligence, pratibha, flint-like intelligence, that strikes sparks as soon as you rub it against. So you start rubbing the two sticks, you see, as they say in the Upanishads, one against the other. And the rubbing effect is the sadhana, the practice you do. And you're striking sparks in the cave of the heart, lighting up the whole territory of consciousness with it. So you go for the intelligence, and then someone finds out, as I just told you, guess what? There's an end of knowledge in truth. And then you find out, oh, the real essence is formless. The real essence is, the essence that's in the container is something that cannot be spoken. So knowledge is only suggesting it, it's only inferring it, it's only pointing to it. Shrutayaha pramanam, as I just chanted. That proof of everything is in the Shruti. the revealed scriptures. Here's the chart on it. Shruti, the revealed scriptures. You must hear the truth first. Shruti, you must then reason about it, yukti, and then anubhava, get your direct experience around it. It's one of the secrets of the scriptures. In India, we think of the scriptures as something that is eternal. You see, it's not just a effect of the human intellect, as we were just saying, which proves the point very nicely. That is, if somebody tells us the truth and God are beyond our own intellects, no matter how sharpened and pointed and refined the intellect may get, then the next thing to say is that Parashaya, the scriptures that reveal this truth, are not just a product of the human intellect. That's just a mechanism along the way. But actually, they might be originating in the seers, in the realized souls. And then someone else comes along and says, well, maybe they really originate from Ishvara, Ishvariya, which is what we're studying today. This is the final class of a series of, I think, 5 classes now, called Advaita of the Avatars. There's 2 Sanskrit words there. The last one is known to us, but I'm not meaning it in the Hollywood sense. Avatar means that which descends, that consciousness that descends into the human form. It makes it God walking around on 2 legs when it's realized. It's there in everyone. It's even there in everything. But it's not a thing, and it's not a form. So it's going to be something that you seek out that's very subtle, like oil and sesame seed, the scriptures say. Something you would have never expected, but there it is. And you have to take some effort to squeeze it out, to bring it out from hiding. So Advaita means, as we said this morning in satsang, when one young student asked, what is Advaita? I said, well, get out a couple pieces of paper and label each side 1 to 50, and we'll start talking about it. And by the time the class starts at 2:30, we'll have to end our conversation. Advaita is a big subject, but the word we've chosen in English is non-duality. Oneness doesn't quite work in English because we don't want to limit that by saying it's one. It's not 2. It might be closer to the description. Whatever the case may be, Advaita is a good Sanskrit word. Non-duality gives you a sort of taste, a sort of aroma, a sort of feel. I'm talking about subtler senses here, your subtle senses inside of you, for this very broad subject. And in SRV, we tend to look at it as dual, qualified dual, and non-dual. It covers a gamut of perspectives. And it's also found at the base of every religion, not just in Vedanta, and Hinduism and Buddhism and the Indian folds, yoga and so forth. Those definitely proclaim Advaita as their foundation. Even Tantra, with its worship and everything, it's all done like the puja, in a sense of oneness. The altar, there's the mudra for it, you see, that's the deer. Mriga mudra it's called. That altar is inside of me, so the first time, before you even start doing the altar, you usually use this mudra, this hand position, sacred hand position, to say, really my worship, I'm doing it all inside, you see. And that's just an outer symbol. So that's how you avoid idol worship. Sometimes some religions have fallen into great fear about idol worship. Judaism, Christianity had a real problem with it. Muslims had a real problem with it. The Hindus never had a problem with it because they started out saying, that's just a symbol of what's inside of me. And so they stopped the problem at the root. And they entered into the worship saying, I and my Father are one, or thou art that. And this altar is inside my own heart. So I'm just deifying this thing so that I'm certain that it's sanctified. I'm certain it's holy. I'm certain it's sacred. And so Brahman is in the food. Brahman is the one who partakes of the food. Brahman is the nourishing power in the food. Brahman is the act of offering the food to another person. Brahman is the act of offering the food to you. Brahman is the sacred fire that burns the food inside the sacred human body. Brahman is the articles on which the food is placed. There's nowhere I can go that there's not Brahman. See, everywhere is Brahman. See, there's this rule, you don't point your feet at the altar, see, when you're in a Hindu temple. So I tell my students, if you go into the Hindu shrine and temple, Don't sit with your legs out pointed toward the halter just because your knees hurt or something. Find another way to sit. So I told a person that once, and then it reminded me of this teaching you heard. Well, but Brahmins in everywhere, so where is it that I can point my feet? There's no place I can point my feet because Brahmins everywhere. So, of course, that's a higher understanding, and you forget about all such observances. But that's the point. These sacred observances or rituals are there, and that's why they say you could find the origin to the scriptures are coming from Ishvara, that great avatar, Advaita of the avatar. But the highest knowers of truth tell you, actually, it doesn't come and go. It's of divine origin. Yes, it's there when Ishvara projects itself as the avatar, as the Ram, as the Krishna, as the Buddha, as the Christ, as the Chaitanya, as the Shankara, as the Ramakrishna. There's 7 of them right there in historical line. Those avatars, the non-dual truth was with them when they were born. You see, they brought it with them. Don't leave home without it. You see. So this is what's called a parashaya. It's not parashaya that it's just a product of the human intellect, because then you limit it. You see. And that's why if you think in that way, you start to do a discredit to the scriptures. Pretty soon they become unpopular and people don't believe in them anymore. But in India, they lived so long. If any of you have read the Upanishads, which is sort of the Bibles of Hinduism, you know that if you pick one up and read it, it's 10,000 years old that you're reading, see? And and you say, well, gee, time didn't tamper with this. Even in English. It went through 2 or 3 different transliterations, you see, and even the translation is still solid. You've got a good translator there, so it sort of proves the fact that there is an eternal moment and we're in it. And just because we're looking back in time 10,000 years, well, that's the blink of an eye of Brahman, you see. And in deep sleep, that time goes away. You could be in a coma for 50 years and wake up and you thought you'd been asleep one night. So that's how mutable time is, how illusory time is. So we're sitting here in the moment but you see we had to create an atmosphere with walls and consecrate the atmosphere so that the divine would visit here, bring it out like oil from sesame seed. Yes, it's in your home too, but maybe you haven't started practicing that divine ritual yet. Deifying everything, deifying your food, deifying the articles on which you place the food, deifying your actions, deifying your mental process and so forth. You start practicing that, it's called sadhana. And that's where you can give yourself the name practitioner. And when you open this heart chakra, you can give yourself the name devotee. Those are very high words. Practitioner and devotee. Forget about sage, seer, vibhuti, ishvarakoti, avatar for now. Just become a good, solid devotee and be a practitioner. Be a yogi, as Krishna tells, or a yogini, as he says in the Bhagavad Gita. Be a practitioner. Vast difference between a practitioner and a teacher. See, like a professor. Somebody who's teaching religions at school for a paycheck, and somebody who has experimented in the religions and has actually practiced them. The latter turns into a Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa when he comes to earth with a parashaya attitude that all the scriptures are within him. Shrutidhara, he has an immediate memory of all the scriptures and all traditions, and that's been with him all his existence, all of existence. Then he can recount them for you. It's a past master. So last week we looked at a chart that might have left it behind, but we looked at the 6 powers of Avatar. And I told you we'd compare it with this chart too. So a little mention of this one. Let's shift over to this chart about the difference between the different kinds of siddhas or powers, because it's a loaded word, that word siddha. It's something we're going to have to come to an understanding about. And since this is the fifth class and final class of this series, I'm sort of naming it, what do they show us? What do the avatars show us in this divine descent? That's a nice phrase that Sri Aurobindo used, divine descent, for the coming of avatar or consciousness into the human frame in a conscious way. What do they show us, and what do they reveal to us by their appearance? Well, one of the things they show is the vast difference between powers that are occult, powers that are limited, powers that are worldly, powers that are misleading, and divine powers that they have. So there's a lot of question about that. You say, well, we shouldn't have any attraction to sensational things, like Christ walking on the water and so forth. But we say, well, he has it. He used that. He made wine and loaves and so forth out of a few, and fish out of a basket and so forth. And he walked on the water. He had these divine powers, and they seem to be rather occult. But there's a vast difference between a person, as he said, I don't do these for show. I do those for the doubters, so the doubters will start to understand. So the avatar is there for working with all levels of humanity. He doesn't just work with those who are ready, but actually, and most teachers do, just work with those who are ready. But this being has a very deep interest in the fallen and the lowly ones. It's called Patita Pavana. Patita Pavana. And also has a very deep interest in the evil. The evil beings, those who are under evil influences, by a lot of the teachings of the avatars, like, say, the Ramayana, if you've read it. Ram was one of the earliest of avatars. In fact, his birthday was last Saturday, and Hanuman's birthday was on Thursday. So we have these two great figures from ancient times, the oldest of Avatar and his follower, Hanuman. And that scripture, the Ramayana, has so many descriptions in it of Ram battling evil beings. Rakshasas was the Sanskrit word back there. They're Rakshasas, you see. And he went to the forest. He was banned to the forest with his wife Sita, and they had to kill many Rakshasas and chase them out of the forest and so forth, till one of them abducted Sita and took her away, and he had to go looking for her. And that's when Hanuman jumped the ocean from India to Ceylon, and they built a bridge later. Now the satellite is showing from the air. You see this. I think they can see where that bridge was. I thought it was just a mythological thing, and now you can actually go up online and see the pylons of this old bridge that were stretched from Indian subcontinent to Ceylon. That's what they say anyway. We hope it isn't a hoax. It's actually a real photograph. So that whole epic, Ram was battling Rakshasas, evil beings. But the thing about it is, this isn't just your ordinary battle where there's a victor and a loser. Everyone wins. In the case of the Avatar, if the Avatar kills you, you become his energy. He takes your energy. So actually Ravana, the great evil in the Ramayana, knew that if he was killed by Ram, he would transcend his evil. He knew there was no other way he could. He would stay an evil person for many lifetimes. There was only one way out of that. So he had a sort of second sight, you see. He was thinking, I'm evil, I'll never get out of it. But I could get out of it if Ram kills me. So the whole thing, you find out, Ravana was leading up to the war. You see, in the fight between Ram and Ravana. And he would get dispatched by this great Avatar, and then he would be freed. In the Divine Mother scriptures, you find the same thing. The Devi, Srimad Devi Bhagavatam and so forth. Every evil being she kills on the battlefield, which is a mass of them that come at her to try and win battle with her, she dispatches them with her weapons. And this is all symbolic of taking the soul up and out of its predicament. It's stripping its mask off of it. You see, the mask of evil, the mask of vice, and so forth. Resist not evil kind of idea. So that is a penchant of the Avatar. My point is, he works with all levels of humanity. And so if you look at the Avatar's relationship with power, Shakti they call it in our tradition, I was mentioning it this morning, Shakti. is a divine mother power. And the Upanishads call her like a spider. You see, the web is prana going out everywhere. And if a blade of grass grows, or a cow dies, or anything happens anywhere in the creation, it's just like it moves a little bit of that prana, and that prana is a web stretching back to her, and she's the spider on it. She knows every little thing by that vibration. And prana is like vibration. I used to use the analogy of a lake. See, and you're sitting there with your big toe in it. That's all that's in it. You're right on the banks. It's a placid lake. And you just have your big toe in it. You see, you're sitting there meditating. Somebody a couple miles across the lake drops a stone in there, and the waves start heading towards you. See? And they're big waves at first, and they're small waves, and then they're minute, and then they finally just turn into this very, very, very small impetus of waves, almost underneath the water, like a hidden tidal wave. We know that all too well. Then all of a sudden, you feel this little touch against your big toe, and somebody somewhere moved, some action happened. Well, that is how everything is connected by the prana. There's another story. Ramakrishna took his beloved disciple to the lake. They call it a tank in India, this ghat. They call it a ghat. Took it to this ghat, and see, there's this beautiful expanse of water, but this kind of hyacinth-like plant had grown over the whole thing, covered the whole thing. And Sri Ramakrishna said, "Watch this." And he reached down and just grabbed one tendril of that hyacinth plant and pulled it, and for about a quarter of a mile across the ghat, the whole plant moved towards him. And he turned to the disciple and with pregnant words said, "Just like that, everything is connected under the surface." That's prana. Everything lives by this very subtle energy. So you don't have to go to parties anymore where people have a slight interest in things esoteric and say, "Oh, everything's connected by something we don't know." They've outlined that long ago. They knew what it was, and they know how it works. In fact, the first requisite of a yogi or yogini is to know the prana. How do you do that? You're doing it right now without knowing it. You're breathing. Now just try doing it consciously. Try drawing every breath in consciousness. We talked about it this morning. Puraka is the in-breath, Kumbhaka is the held breath, or Echaka is the out-breath. And then there's another Kumbhaka or held breath at the bottom of that. They call it a 3 movement, but it's actually 4. And lo and behold, that in-breath is the A of Om, and that held breath is the U of Om, and that out-breath is the M of Om. And that's also your waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. It's also creation, preservation, and destruction. It's also Father, Mother, and Guru. There's so many triple teachings that go with that. So to become aware of this is to connect things, connect the dots, follow the trail of breadcrumbs, and find out that this subtle force that's everywhere isn't just some person's imagination or some possibility in someone's mind, some intuition that someone had. You see, this is the second level of consciousness. This is the second atmosphere. This altar on my left is the 5 atmospheres. Shiva's in the Bhutakasha, and Swamiji is at the Pranakasha, Holy Mother's at the Manakasha, Sri Ramakrishna is at the Jnanakasha, and Kali is in the Chiddakasha. See, there are 5 different levels in which these great beings operate on, and they can interchange between them. And that's the kingdoms of heaven within you right now. There's a realm of insects, plants, animals, and objects. Do you deny it? Well, you can just as easily affirm that there's also an inner atmosphere or akasha made of life force, made of energy, made of vital force from food. It operates your breathing apparatus. It causes you to see, to hear, to feel, to touch, to smell. Your 5 senses aren't just fleshy orbs or flaps, you see. They actually have powers in them, right? Well, that power isn't physical. That power is pranic. So whenever I get on the prana, I start talking too long about it because it's a missing link in our Western thinking. We don't know about the prana, and we don't know about the tanmatras, the subtle senses. We only know about the external ones. So to make that bridge, then, you jump to real power. And now you're starting to talk about a kind of power that is a mental power, the kind of power that forges universes in space and time, the kind of power that can level mountains, Ram Prasad says in one of his songs. Kali laughs with the power that can level mountains. Mother Kali, the mother of the universe, you see. Her wisdom laughter is like thunder, can level mountains. So great thinkers, great lovers of reality, they've been thinking about this Shakti power inside of them. So that web is the prana, and that person on it is the Shakti, that divine personage. She's overseeing everything. She knows everything that happens. So if you want to know what omniscience means, look into that teaching, because there's also 3 Oms in our tradition, aren't there? Omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence. There are also AUMs in our tradition, in English, and one of them is omnipresence, you see, and one of them is omniscience. So the omniscience of everything is that power that's vested in Mother. Well, the avatars come to realize this power, and it's called the 8 divine powers. Let's look at them really quickly. First, there's the 3 primary ones that remove the 3 kinds of suffering. That's why I put this addendum down here. The 3 kinds of sufferings pertain, and this is what the avatar is really coming. It's get you up and out of suffering, because suffering is self-actuated. You cause yourself to suffer with your relationships with others, with your relationship with objects. Other people can cause you to suffering, but you'll find out you have a karma with them, so it's an even exchange. If you blame your parents for all your problems, your upbringing, and you look back in a lifetime before that, you'll probably find out you had some karma with those parents. And even if you didn't, you chose those parents. Do your parents choose you? Do you ever hear your mother or father said, I chose you out of the ethers, you see? You probably just heard them say, you came through some mechanism we know nothing about. And the fact they know nothing about prana. Prana is of this realm. 3rd chakra, Manipura, ancestors, fetus, food being eaten and digested. It's right here. This is a very powerful exchange of souls. The unillumined souls go out of this chakra when they die and come back in. Unillumined means the ancestors. Good moral people live at this center, but not the devotees. Devotees transcend the realm of the ancestors. They go the path of no return to the realm of the ancestors, as Krishna calls it. So Avatar wants you up and out of this self-actuated suffering. So the 3 types of suffering are there in this box, lower left. First is adhyatmika, caused by the mind. And there are 2 types of it, A and B, mental suffering and physical suffering. As I said in one class several weeks ago, you can be an atheist, you can be an agnostic, you can be a non-believer, or you can not care that there's God, have no opinion. But one thing you have to agree on with everyone, suffering is. It's the first noble truth of Buddhism. There are 4 noble truths. The first is suffering is. That means it's your business. And lo and behold, not only your suffering is your business, but the suffering of others is very much your business. There's individual suffering, there's collective suffering. We're not free of the karma of our country, see. Just because we object to the war or object to coveting other people's objects or so forth. Only the yogi and yogini can get free of that kind of karma and get above it like Buddha and Christ did in the wilderness and under the bo tree. When they get out of that responsibility, then they take on the responsibility to bring light to you. That's a different kind of responsibility. First, it's the responsibility of how we suffer, how much karma we have. You reap what you sow in that kind of level of teaching. But if you get out of that morass of karma, you don't get free. You get responsibility for freedom. You've heard freedom comes with responsibility, with a price. Well, that's to bring light back into that massive suffering. Ram Prasad sings, I could sing it for you, but he says, "O Mother, My mind is completely depressed today because in my meditations I saw the ocean of universal suffering this morning. If you see the ocean of universal suffering, then you're completely overwhelmed by the import of it, by the intensity of it. And you wonder, what can I do against that? How can I help that? It's so vast. And so many people cling to it. Samsara, they cling to it. So that's why we're offering not just the solution of suffering, that is Lord Kapila, whose teaching this is, and Lord Buddha, whose teaching it became later, is that we're offering you solutions for suffering. So in that mental suffering arena, how is it cured? It's caused by the mind, it has to be cured by the mind. Internal means. You cannot go to conventional methods outside and expect your suffering to go away. You're going to have to get to the root of it, obviously. So if you have passion, you have to practice control. If you have anger, you have to practice compassion. If you have attachment, self-analysis. That is, attachment is a kind of confusion. So you start analyzing the makeup of the universe, then you'll come to know that you can detach from it. Why? Because when you analyze it, you see it's empty. So why should I hold on to it? It's not fulfilling me. Objects can get stolen. They can get bored. You can get bored with them. They can decay. They can stop working. You can lose them. So they're a source of my suffering, so I should detach from them. So analyze. Analyze anything that comes to you. Analyze your suffering. We were analyzing the self this morning. We had gone beyond our suffering and we were doing Atma Vichara, right? Looking into the nature of the true self. And that's a very high level of analysis. If you have fear, look at the evolutes, the origins of things. Look back to the cause, and you'll find where your fear came from. Fear lies in the curtain of nescience, which is the cloud of unknowing which falls over the mind when you're born, unless you can pierce it in your previous lifetime. Become fearless like Swami Vivekananda. I mean, for no good reason do we sing that. Jai Vireshwara, Jai Tripudari, Gaye Hamu Sab Mahima Teri. Jai Vireshwara, Jai Tripudari, Gaye Hamu Sab Mahima Teri. Jai Ho, Vivekananda, Gunjadanu, Mahima Tihari. Jai Ho, Vivekananda, Gunjadanu, Mahimati Hari. Jai Vireshwara, Jai Tripurari, Gaye Ham Sab Mahimate. Not for no good reason that we sing that it was written by a living Swami in India who taught it to me about Swami Vivekananda. He was fearless. He says, we shall crush the stars to atoms, we shall unhinge the universe in space and time. Don't you know who we are? We are the children of the Advaitic Avatar, who is the son of Mother Kali. I was saying this morning in conversation at home, after breakfast, what's really been striking me lately is the underground river of Vedanta. That's a kind of phrase we use. That 5 million people now worship Sri Ramakrishna and there's been no advertising. See? Not like this flash in the pan thing where there's this great soul has come. He was unknown in his life. Jesus, unknown in his life, generally speaking. See? Buddha, unknown in his life. I mean, it took the Crusades to make Christ known further. It took 500 arhats after Buddha had passed away to pass the word of Buddhism on to others. So they're a big fish in a small pond, but called this world, but nobody realizes it until after they're gone. The ship has already passed and the wake is left over. A few people get out there and surf that wake. So they come to know a little bit what the import of this great soul passing through the village of the world had on the world, what kind of effect it had. So that fearlessness is something, if you trace origins, the ultimate origin you'll arrive at is Ishvara, talked about here. See, he comes with the scriptures, he's Shrutidhara, he comes with knowledge of all systems, knowledge of all religions. Ramakrishna practiced the Muslim religion with Govinda Rai. He put all the pictures of Kali out of his room, gave up the Hindu diet, went with the Muslims, you see. Then he had a vision of Christ, and he had a vision of Mother Kali. See, so he practiced so many religions and so many lineages. See, Vaishnavism, Shaivism, Shaktism, because he had it all in him. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He wasn't trying to prove that the scriptures are eternal. He was exemplifying them. So the underground river of Vedanta, you see, now has 5 million people worshipping this great soul. That's a drop in the bucket compared to how many people there are in the world. But still, a vast amount, considering that no advertising has ever been done. It's all been people coming naturally to the Mother, see, underneath this veil. We don't have to worry about the Caesars of the world. We're not a worldwide movement. We're a non-movement. We don't go and proclaim the Mother everywhere. She comes to us and makes us still. Then people who like stillness come to us. Like attracts like, you might have heard. So we just proceed our own quiet little way. So, fear, look into the origins and evolutes of things. Look back to where all of this started, and you'll find your fear in that curtain of nescience, and you'll destroy it. And then you can sing a song like this. Or someone will sing a song about you like this. What a fearless person that was. If you have jealousy, then be generous. Go out and start giving away. And you'll get over your jealousy. If you have depression, practice non-attachment. So some of the modern kleshas, we're calling them here, modern obstacles and their solutions. Part B of that teaching is physical suffering. It's cured by discriminative wisdom, practical regimens, and forbearance. When you put those three together, then even your physical sufferings will seem less to you. Father Yoga Vishishta, Lord Vishishta says, a person who's being stabbed by many swords, who has that kind of combination, feels like gentle fingers are massaging him all over his body. Spears are going through him. It's lovely. See? He's that far above his suffering. Speaking of above suffering, Sri Ramakrishna had cancer of the throat when he passed away. And somebody asked him, doesn't it hurt? And he said, only when I talk to you. Then I come down to the body. As soon as you go away, my mind goes back to Kali, where I've trained it to go. And I don't feel this anymore. You might have had the experience in a lesser degree yourself. Toothache goes away when you start reading. And all of a sudden you remember, oh, I have a toothache, because you stopped reading. So the mind has a marvelous power to transcend even physical suffering. So there's the triple solution, they would say, for physical suffering if you're suffering it. Of course, that physical suffering has its origin, because you were looking into origins, right, in the mind. All diseases come from the mind. I have a couple students who are healers, and they like to hear that teaching very much. It all comes from the mind. And basically because of rebirth. Rebirth is the first disease in my tradition. No birth, no suffering. See, no body, no suffering. No head, no headache kind of psychology. So, but tracing origins is going to be very interesting in that case, because you can go back to a place where you were bodiless. And you can then see the witness who was taking on the body and giving up the body. And you can see how you did it. Did I do it in ignorance? Did I do it in half-digested knowledge? Did I do it in wisdom? Or could I possibly do it like they did, That is, not do it at all. In a transcendent position all the time. Well, that's pretty much a description of the first kind of suffering, the three sufferings, adhyatmika. Caused by the mind, caused by the body. There's a second kind of suffering called adibhaudika, caused by other beings. How is that cured? By self-abidance and perseverance. If you want it in a nutshell, confidence. Because self-abidance means I have found myself and I'm immovable in myself. That's the mudra for it. See, right there. And nothing can sway me from it. Somebody was writing me last week, I've been doing pretty good taking the Raja Yoga lessons from you. Thank you very much. It really helped me because my guru passed away. We knew this man, Swami Swahananda, was a great soul, passed away. So this student of Swahananda was writing me. I really was depressed lately because of losing him. But your lessons have really helped, Raja Yoga lessons. He said, everything is going along fine for several months. All of a sudden, boom, somebody insults him at work. He says, I feel worthless. Next email I get, I feel worthless. Actually, he put it much worse than that. I'll just use that word. I feel worthless, there's no meaning to life. And I wrote him back and I said, you fell out of yoga. You were in yoga and now you fell out. Just because someone said something to you? Where's your self-abidance? See? Do you have to listen to the opinions of other people? Or if you listen to them, use it to your advantage. Well, maybe I am a little sloppy at work. Maybe I should change. He didn't present it with very much kindness, but I can overlook that, you see. The problem is reaction. Good things happen to you, like Raja Yoga lessons. Bad things happen to you, like people chewing you out at work, your boss, you see. But that's not the point. The point is how you react to those things. Or better yet, if you don't react to them. That's the teaching of yoga. Patanjali gives it in his Yoga Sutras. Do not react to anything. It's called equanimity. Krishna mentions it 6 times in the Gita. It's called sthiti pragnasya, steady wisdom. If you know yourself, that's self-abidance. If you abide in the self, nothing can sway you from that. 400,000 people dying in a tidal wave cannot sway you from that. A bomb going off in a city somewhere cannot sway you from that. Because the self is all in all. None else exists. And thou art that. I just quoted Swamiji. The self is all in all. None else exists. And thou art that. Try that on for a Triputi. So perseverance also there. Perseverance, or call it forbearance, is the default zone of the wise. They get into samadhi, most of the rest of us don't. So they get into samadhi, they see the Lord. They come out of samadhi and they say, why did I come out? You see. Why do I have to come back to this body, this cage of flesh and bones? Why can't I stay in that peace that passes all understanding that I just experienced? So, when's my next samadhi scheduled? Just get out my little, punch it in. I say mudras like that. You see, I'm giving you mudras and so forth. The mudras of people being born in the next lifetime are going to be this. They're going to come out of the womb like that, you see, or like this. There are new mudras being created all the time. So the abidance, self-abidance, and when it's difficult to abide in the self, then forbearance. I'm calling it here forbearance, you see, or perseverance. So be able to rest in that, in non-reactive state. Asamvedana. It's a nice Sanskrit word. Asamvedana. It's awesome. Be able to rest in that and not sway. I say if you have to sway, then be like a bamboo. You see, it bends in the wind, but it never snaps. Be flexible, but try and be still inside of yourself. The third type of suffering is adidaivaka, that is caused by natural forces. It's cured by transcendence and spiritual practices. That is, if the flood is coming, or if the Armageddon is coming, or if it came and I survived, or whatever the case may be, There are many natural occurrences coming. Call them acts of God if you want. I wouldn't, because God doesn't act. But nevertheless, as a turn of phrase, you can say, nature sometimes rises up in its insentient way and causes a lot of suffering for people. As we found out working in the garden yesterday with my young nephew here who's attending class, nature takes over everything. He was pulling up tarps, and the runners, the weeds had just become part of the tarp, you see. So I said, teach those weeds non-attachment. So he was like pulling them off the tarp. It took him forever, you see. These vines had become one with this tarp that was supposed to keep them down, you see. And it was a year ago I had put them there, and he was tearing them up, you see. Teach those vines non-attachment. So it's like the mind. There's a beautiful song in our tradition that says, "Oh, Mother of the Universe, my mind is a jungle. If I could just clear 1 acre, I'd be happy. And if I did clear 1 acre, I'd build a temple to you and worship in it, and then I'll clear the rest of the jungle later." So if I just get this one place to go to that's peace, right? Peace, peace. Then I can go there any time, and I may have to lay a few tarps down around the periphery of that temple so that the jungle doesn't creep in. But then at some time I can take a machete when I'm stronger, and I can go out there and carve out a kingdom for myself. See? Keep back the weeds of Maya. So the cure for natural forces, and it's a good one, is to transcend them. You want to get beyond nature. It's called koivalya. We were talking about it this morning. Koivalya means in yoga isolation from form. Buddha did it, Christ did it, great souls have done it. Isolation from form. And it's not so ascetic as it sounds. It's that you're not coming under the auspices of form anymore. In fact, there's another beautiful song they sing about Ramakrishna. One of the lines goes, "That great being whom nature could not form." So he took a form, a body. They say when he walked, it's like it wasn't quite touching the earth. You see, it was because he was so subtle and so gentle, so buoyant a spirit. He couldn't button a shirt or close a door. Everything was wide open to him. So this buoyancy, the spiritual buoyancy, is the mind causes it. Enlightened mind causes everything else to be filled with light. And everything else is divine. So you see divinity everywhere. So that kind of transcendence, koivalya, isolation from form, he had attained. They called it nirvikalpa samadhi. Not many of his disciples had it. Only Holy Mother had it, Swamiji had it, Sri Ramakrishna had it, maybe a few others. They all had samadhi, but not of that kind. Nirvikalpa samadhi was a very rare thing to attain. Most people do not come back from it to inhabit the body again. The ordinary being, if you would call it that. Once you attained samadhi, it wouldn't be ordinary anymore. But if an ordinary being had nirvikalpa samadhi, then like a leaf, a blown off leaf in a gale, Ramakrishna said. That's how the soul feels. It's not coming back anywhere, it's gone. You can't even find it. There's another song in our tradition that says, a soul like that, yama, karma, go looking for a soul like that, but they can't find him. So Yama looks in his book of records. He was born, well, I don't know where he is anymore. You see. He has a record of birth here, the Lord of Death says, Yama. He says, but he disappeared, I can't find him. He reached the deathless state. And Karma went looking for him too. The god of Karma come up to Yama and said, I can find him. Everyone leaves a karmic trail. But this man's name was Asheshananda. See? It doesn't leave a residue. My teacher's Asheshananda, the bliss of having no residue at the end of his life. Didn't leave a trace. It was like a bird flying through a sky. You look over there, no trace. See? Or a Roshi, or a martial artist like you, see, walking over rice paper. It doesn't leave a wrinkle. Can you do that, by the way? Still? Probably can. So you don't leave a trace of yourself, no karma. So karma went looking for him, couldn't find him. That's that kind of soul. Well, those are the first three of these 8 great accomplishments. You can see how if we assign them to the avatar, we begin to understand a great soul like that more. We need to understand these souls. We don't have them in the West. We've had a few Meister Eckharts, in Europe, and a few saints in the Catholic tradition, and so forth. But these avatars, other than Jesus, who, by the way, was not a Westerner, you're talking about Far East, Near East, and Middle East, right? These great beings usually are coming out of that level, that area of the world in earliest times. Now we're beginning to see a few. As Vivekananda said, the sun rises in the east, but it sets in the west. So he's giving us hope, you see. Some avatars have come across the western horizon. And you know what Sheshananda said about that. In the east, in the west, avatar is a savior. We see the avatar coming out today, save us, save us. But in the east, he was never a savior, he was an exemplar. He said, save yourself. I'm just here to show you it can be done. In case you doubt, I did it. See, he's not going to, except for the fallen and the lowly ones, he's not going to get down there and save you. You might have noticed there are hundreds and thousands of Christians who haven't been saved yet. If they have been saved, they certainly haven't gotten what we call nirvikalpa samadhi and gotten liberated, because they wouldn't show up here again in the moral crowd. It's not about morality and immorality. It far transcends that. It's not even about dharma and adharma. As we just said, it's not even about knowledge and ignorance. It far transcends that. Talking about something very singular, very original. Adi, Atman. You see, the original Atman, the original soul, the primeval soul, the archetypical soul, the overseer of all. That's Avatar. So we need to understand these beings. And, it's the best of God with form. A lot of us are moving toward the formless. But if you jump from the lowest step to the highest step without knowing the middle steps, then you'll never be a knower of God. Because there are many middle steps. The kingdoms of heaven within you are the middle steps. You have to come to know them. You have a little bit by having some ancestors, by having parents. You're beginning to find out about the middle steps. You're having relationships with people who will eventually die. They'll visit the ancestor realm. And you'll be separate from them, and then you'll be having dreams about them, or visions of them, or conversations in your sleep with them. And it's as if it's all saying, get some knowledge around the middle steps, the cosmology of things. I started out the satsang this morning saying Sankhya is our ground, is our body. It has 24 cosmic principles in it, and we come to know those, and then we know the ground of existence. And then yoga is our energy, prana and so forth, right? Breathing, getting into yoga, staying into yoga. Tantra is in our heart. Worship, love, devotion to everything, especially to the truth. But that devotion is best used against Avatar, you see. Ishvara when it comes. You can't give devotion to Brahman. It's not there to be devoted to. There's no two-ness in Brahman. There's no devotee and devotion in Brahman. It is that which you are, which you seek to be. But Ishvara, you can put plenty of devotion there. You can put your prayer there. You can put your desire for salvation there, and then you can get to the Father through the Son, and that's called liberation. To actually see God face to face. Mahatma Gandhi said about Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, when you see Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, you see God face to face. That's just one of a whole host of great beings that when they saw or heard about Ramakrishna, some of them were actually living in his time, said, this is seeing God face to face when you look at Ramakrishna. So if you look at his picture, you're seeing the first photograph ever taken of God. When Swami told me that, we were sitting around a table, hobnobbing with the Swami, such is my life. He was the last living devotee, one of the two last living devotees of Holy Mother. So we weren't saying much, we were just sitting in silence. all of a sudden he said, Babaji, look there. I looked up, picture of Ramakrishna, sitting in yogic style. There's only 3 pictures of Ramakrishna. Actually 4, if you count the one on the funeral pyre. So he pointed at the picture and said, first time God was ever photographed. This is a man in samadhi. So God has visited the frame and taken over the frame completely. There's no more Ramakrishna left. Or he was named Gadadhar. Now he had to take the name Ramakrishna because that's the name of the first 2 avatars, Rama and Krishna. We don't know who gave him that name, but we can certainly figure out why he was given that name. And that's probably more important. It's the only time when why is more important than who. So you can see then, if you're asking about powers, if you're interested in powers, then the avatar says, I will give you the first three primary powers, the ability to overcome suffering. You say, you're taken off guard. Because I thought powers were this: the power of invisibility, the power of weightlessness, right? Levitation. The power of all expansiveness, where I can go anywhere, do anything I want. The power to fulfill my own desires. The power to glorify myself and to put myself above others. The power of dominion, domination, where I can go to other countries and meet foreign peoples and kill them and put them under my domination, you see. The power of attraction. I make myself all attracting to people, to others. And the power of enjoyment. Those are called the 8 occult powers. The quotes below there are at the bottom here are by Sri Ramakrishna and Sri Krishna, the 2 bookends. 2 bookend avatars at this age we're living in, you see. You've got Rama and Krishna, and then you've got Ramakrishna. The age is closing, you see. In fact, Holy Mother has on one of these charts, Satyuga began again when Ramakrishna was born. The age of truth began again. So we could say Kali Yuga stopped when Kali came. He says, a true lover does not seek anything from God except pure love. He does not seek miracles or occult powers. To such a one, the 8 occult powers are like crow droppings by the side of the road. Mm-hmm. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, good luck to you, you see. I'll see you out on the side of the road with a can and a stick. Sri Krishna says, you will not succeed in realizing God if you possess even one of the 8 occult powers. So I've told you the story about Sri Ramakrishna having these occult powers. Christ had them. It's not like they don't come to you. When you start meditating, they come to you. Come to everyone who gets deep in their soul. They're there. So Ramakrishna calls the young Naren about your age, maybe a little younger, to him. See, I have all these occult powers for my meditation. Do you want them? I can give them to you. And Naren said, he's a thoughtful young man. Will they help me in my spiritual life? Ramakrishna said, no. They may even become a hindrance to you. And Naren said, I don't want them. And Ramakrishna was just testing him. So these occult powers linger back inside that soul who never uses them. Or if they do use it, they have a very special purpose for it. So this is an important teaching in my mind. I've presented this chart maybe once a year for the last 20 years that SRV has been in existence, always trying to show the difference between the 8 occult powers and the 8 great accomplishments. These other 5 of the great accomplishments, if you can get rid of these interpersonal suffering, external suffering, and cosmic suffering, then the 5 secondary siddhis are even more beautiful, I think. Pursuing a spiritual path called Dharma, gaining knowledge of the scriptures, Vidya Shastra, one of the great secrets of India, concentration, study, Svadhyaya. If you can develop a good habit of Svadhyaya, keep it up your whole life, knowledge will overcome ignorance. It's a fast way of getting enlightenment. It's called the liberation of knowledge. Soak your mind in it. Don't worry about how much you don't know or how much is there. Just immerse yourself in it till the mind can't do anything but think bits of knowledge. Because ignorance is self-imposed too, just like evil and so forth. You're making yourself ignorant. Nobody's doing it. No God will get you out of it. No devil has gotten you into it. See, it's your doing. You're God and devil. It's all inside of you. And number 7, gaining guru, disciples, friends, and compatriots. We all know how rare true friends are. Does anyone have true friends in this room? If you raise your hand, then you're very fortunate. How certain are you that they're your true friends? Would be the next question. That is, Judas was a friend to Jesus. He loved Jesus. See? Right? Judas was a friend to Jesus. But he feared. See why he had fear, right? So, and most of the disciples had fear. Oh, I love you. I'll never abandon you. One of the apostles said to Christ. He said, before the cock crows 3 times, you will have given me up. And it happened, just like Christ said. So, true friends, true compatriots, a good guru, or a guru's disciples, those are one of the great accomplishments of this life. Beautiful. Now, 8, achieving self-purification. I would say mental would be a good word for that, because the self's already pure. When we say self there, we mean the mind self. Getting a pure mind. Bhuta Shuddhi, purity of location. Kriya Shuddhi, purity of action. And Chit Shuddhi, purity of mind. Those are the 3 purities of Tantra philosophy. This is a beautiful chart mixing Vedanta, Sankhya, and Tantra in it. There you see the 6 treasures of God, which we looked at in another chart separately last week, if you remember. Shri, opulence or wealth. That is not just of a physical kind, of course, especially spiritual kind. Bala, glory or power. You see the difference between God's glory and man's glory through the occult powers. One is egoless. One isn't trying to get for the self. One is trying to give to everyone else, you see. It's not a matter of taking, it's giving. That kind of glory. Aishwarya, strength or lordship. Tejas, splendor and radiance. Vijnana, wisdom or truth. And Tyaga, renunciation, transcendence. Chagi, 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 gita, 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 gita. You say chagi many, many times, it turns into Gita. And Gita is the great song of India by Sri Krishna. So you repeat it over and over again, then it turns into chagi, renunciation. So the message of the Gita is renunciation. Some say it's karma yoga, some say it's jnana yoga, some say this and that. Sri Ramakrishna said it's what you get when you say chagi many times, or Gita many times. It turns into renunciation. The meaning of siddhi then. Now, with that in our minds, let's look back at this first chart here for a second so we can complete it. The Vedic secrets of the scriptures. The quote here by Lord Vashishta, whom I mentioned, is, "Those virtuous ones alone gain moksha," that's liberation, "who from their early childhood train themselves in Atmagyan scriptures in the company of holy beings. Therefore know, O sedulous seeker, that the state of Brahman is attained via the combination of illumined preceptor, Jnana Shastras, and the sincere disciple." That's why if you have gained, the 3 victory over the 3 kinds of suffering, and you've gone on and gained the secondary siddhis, you'll see how important that is, because then you can fulfill this quote of Lord Vashishta. You have those 3 important teachings, the 3 proofs of truth, sometimes they call it. Guru Anushasana, a good teacher, Vidya Shastra, study of the scriptures, and Aparoksha Anubhuti, a nice 7-syllable Sanskrit word. Aparoksha Anubhuti means direct spiritual experience. You're coming to know God through your own efforts, through your own self-efforts. You're not waiting around for grace or for someone to help you. You dive in and get experience for yourself, and that qualifies you. They're listed right there in white, the three great sources. Vidya Shastra, Guru Anushasana, and Aparakshya Bhuti, if you want to write them down. The three techniques for interpreting the scriptures I mentioned last week. Pratitantra Siddhanta. Some people like to separate the religions and doctrines and say mine's better than yours. My watch keeps the only right time. Yours doesn't, as Ramakrishna used to say. Is the hypocritical, narrow way of religion. Sarvatantra Siddhanta means by way of reconciliation. Oh, let's bring these paths together and make them nice and compatible with one another. Not going to happen in some cases, but it's a nice thought. I've been myself asked to be on different religious panels with other religious teachers, and kind of ad nauseum through the 80s and 90s we did it. It didn't really have much of an effect. Just brought a few people together to agree on some things and disagree on others. Found out we had to agree to disagree. But what the Avatar comes to show us is Sahaja Tantra Siddhanta, by way of non-dual synthesis. It's natural. Sahaja means natural. It's a kind of samadhi called Sahaja Samadhi. It means a natural state of abidance in the Lord. So this Sahaja Tantra Siddhanta means the Avatar comes, and you might have noticed, without any religious affiliations. There was no Christianity when Christ walked the earth. So they come and are the walking Bible, they are the walking Quran, they are the walking Upanishads, because they have the scriptures in them, which we just looked at it. See, Ishvara and eternity, they have those scriptures within them. All they need to do is manifest them. So that way of natural synthesis is the way the avatars would look at other religions and other founders of other religions. That's why two classes ago I had that beautiful chart, Mahavakya of the avatars up here. And we looked at all the different religions, Moses, what he said, Christ, what he said, Muhammad, what he said, and so forth. We saw they all had this overall agreement about non-dual reality in their scriptures. Whether those scriptures were the Old Testament or the New Testament or the Quran or the Upanishads, you can find those grounds for agreement. We looked at the four views, origin of the scriptures. You should know there are two types of knowledge, Paravid and Aparavid. Paravidya is spiritual and revelatory, and Aparavidya is religious, secular, and intellectual. We separate the religious from the spiritual because the religious quite often falls into the conventional set and doesn't really live up to its task of enlightening the soul. It's happened in India, it's happened here in the West, that the priestcraft has lowered the ideal and kept the truth from the people, or made it a matter of what Vivekananda called religious shopkeeping. Sanctimonious shopkeeping, I think, probably be more accurate. But there is this thing called Paravid. It's revelatory, which is why you want to look for those revealed scriptures and maybe leave aside the dualistic scriptures, the fundamentalist scriptures. If you go into the fundamentalist scriptures, you should be an ant. Ramakrishna said, an ant takes a combination of sand and sugar and just takes the sugar grains and leaves a pile of sand afterwards. So if you go into those scriptures that are a combination of revelatory and conventional, then you should have that ability to discriminate between them. Final, at the bottom of the chart here, we have two different ways of saying the same thing that happened in two different periods of India's religious life. One's called the three potent practices, Shravana, Manana, and Nidijasana. Shravana means hear the truth. Manana means, once I've heard it, I have to roll it around in my mind. How long? For a long, long time, Shankara says in the scripture. I was saying this morning, when people come, take the Vedanta for 6 months, accept me as their teacher, then I can't catch a sight of them anymore. See? What happened to them? Well, it wasn't my path. What do you mean? Vedanta isn't a path. It makes your path better. You need to stay with the teachings for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. You have stayed with your wife or husband for 10, 20, 30, 40 years and you don't even know them yet. Most likely. I mean, this is where getting true friends and true compatriots and true disciples and true gurus comes from. Perseverance, right? You wait it out. You look at it. You inspect it. You're there for the entire duration. You're a participant in it. You're not a bond slave to nature or to the various things of Maya. It's perseverance again. That's the solution for things. So you can't know a teacher or a teaching as vast as Vedanta, particularly in just 6 months. So stick with it, stay with it. Contemplate it for a long time, and then you'll get realization, nididhyasana. So that's Shravana, Manana, nididhyasana, and it's what I was mentioning this morning. Then somebody said, is that it after nididhyasana? You just realize the transcendent truth and you're gone and gone forever? He said, no, there's something called satchatkara, manifesting it again, bringing it all back around full cycle and manifesting it. And that's what you see in Vivekananda, is the messenger of the avatar in this day and age. That's what you see in him. He wanted to bring it out of books and temples and into life and manifest the Vedanta here and now. The beautiful thing about him. On the other side, it's really the same system, but has a little different way of saying it. Shruti, hearing the truth. Yukti, reasoning about the truth. Anubhava, experiencing the truth. Another way of saying it, and a little different wordage, as you could say. That covers the chart of the Vedic secrets of the scriptures, or Vedantic secret of the scriptures. I'll leave it up for you at the break, and we'll also show it to the live streaming audience afterwards. But it's why the scriptures of India have lived so long and remained untouched, whereas other scriptures have not lived that long, and they've been heavily interpolated, sometimes even distorted out of all recognition. But untouched, the Upanishads. You can still pick them up, hear the ring of truth from the rishi who wrote them after they had the realization. Truth should be simple, right? So it's simple, but it's simply profound. Some of those Upanishads are 12 slokas long. The most famous of them is 12 slokas long. Imagine that. You can read it in 5 minutes. It's called the Mandukya Upanishad. And it's impressed the most amount of people with the non-dual philosophy. It's all about the word Om. Everything here is Om. Everything that was before is Om. And everything that will come is nothing other than Om. That's its first sloka. See? It's all the word. If you look at that from the standpoint of the original Aparashaya scripture, or if you look at it from the standpoint of science, pretty much saying the same thing. It's all vibration. It's just that there are different levels of vibration. Time is a layer cake. It's not a linear line. Everything exists on top of each other. It's not it exists once and now it doesn't exist in the middle and it's going to be gone in the end. We're looking at things linear. We should be looking at it as a layer cake. Kali Yuga is the first, you see. There's a layer of frosting in between called the Treta Yuga, another layer of cake called the Dwapara Yuga, and then the nice frosting on the top is called the Satya Yuga. All the yugas exist simultaneously at the same time. That's called eternity. And that's why these scriptures make sense to us today as much as they did 10,000 years ago. Don't throw them out because they're old. You're old. Get new. Get reborn. The last quote here, and we should take our break. Atmagyan scriptures treat self-knowledge and lead to divine wisdom. Ordinary shastras treat terrestrial knowledge and lead to further bondage. But even the Atmagyan scriptures will be non-productive if the imp of lower mind, attached to conventional and secular knowledge, is not exercised thoroughly. So, my point, people can come and hear these truths and go away without realizing them, half digested, or maybe rejected, as the case may be, if that imp of lower mind is still there in the process. But the Atmagyan scriptures lead to divine wisdom, and actually, and we can end with this, Shankara actually sings about that, some of his disciples. Sagara Gamanam Vata Parifadanam Matavadanam Jana Vihina Sarvamatena Muktim Navajati Janma Shashina Vajagovindam Vajagovindam Mugamate Samprapte Sanihite Kale Nahi Nahi Rakshati Tukrin Karne Vajagovindam. To that, and that's one that you haven't heard very often. And he says there, basically, the offering of religious gifts, the practices of ritual in the temple, the trips that you make to the source of the Ganges, or to where the Ganges enters into the ocean, called pilgrimage. None of those do you any good unless you have self-knowledge. That's basically what he's saying there. Self-knowledge will turn everything into a matter of realization. Without it, all those very same things turn into Maya. It's a magical alchemy of the human mind to be able to do that. So let's leave you with that little bit of musical wisdom, and return after our break to look at some more, to finish up this class on Advaita, the avatars. And we will show you these charts for the live streaming while we're on our break. Aloha, namaste. Welcome back to our SRV ashram. And we were talking about what happens inside the walls of such a place. And we just had a good hour and a half example of the kind of deep study you get here in the Vedanta, at Vedanta centers and ashrams where swamis and brahmacharis and gurus come to teach that salient system with all its facets. Vedanta, Tantra, Yoga, Samkhya, Buddhism even. All of them so much interconnected. They're all Indian philosophy, and why we love Mother India so much. And some of us have more than just an intrigue with her lands and her various kinds of mangoes and so forth. But we also have this very deep memory of association with the great teachings and teachers that have come out in droves, abundance, not just one prophet, but dozens and hundreds, not just one holy book, but hundreds and thousands of them over time immemorial. So a very special place to focus on if you have an interest in spirituality. Again, making a little distinction that between Vedanta and Hinduism. Hinduism is the religious side, the many gods and goddesses and so forth, to a certain extent. But Vedanta also treats the many gods and goddesses in a very special way, because it does show that oneness behind them, and that's what Avatar does. They too have an ideal. For instance, Ramakrishna had the ideal of Mother Kali, and Chaitanya had the ideal of Krishna, Vishnu, and Shankara had the ideal of Lord Shiva. But he knew about Lord Shiva, but he also knew about Paramashiva. And Chaitanya knew about Vishnu, but he also knew about Mahavishnu. And Ramakrishna knew about Kali, he also knew about Mahakali, or Divine Mother. So there are aspects, even subtler aspects to reality that are qualified non-dualistic, as we say, which is one of those beautiful facets of Indian philosophy you look into. You really can't speak about truth or describe it anyway, so you have to come to a qualified non-dualistic position and use words. Words at that level are not Maya, like I will kill you, or how's the weather. Those are Mayic mantras at very low and medium levels. But it's more like, or how's the weather, very mundane weather mantra. But more like Mahamaya, where Mother takes over and you're interested in wisdom, as we saw in this beautiful chart. So the Avatar shows us many things, and I wanted to show you what the Avatar would bring in the case of the difference between it and theology and science. And this is a wordy chart, but I'm not going to really take a long time on it. Just to say that you see the three columns there. Vedanta's, the subtitle is Comparative Views of Origination, Nature, Consciousness, and Life and Death. How each of these systems, if you will, would treat them. And Vedanta would treat origination by saying non-origination. That's one of its greatest of all teachings, is non-origination, that there was no beginning and there is no end. There was no birth, so there can be no death. And if you're thinking in terms of origins, which in my opinion Christ didn't want you to think ultimately in terms of origins. To him the origin was the Word. But he didn't want you to stop at the Word. He wanted you to get to the Father through the Son. So he also had this whole ideology, realization is a better word, about the Almighty Father, which he merged with in meditation. And an avatar is like that, really manifests the non-dual part of, whether you call it Almighty Father or Brahman or Allah, manifests the non-dual in a body. And you can see that sign in them. They attract many profound souls. Buddha attracted the Noble Eight, and Christ had the 12 apostles, and Ramakrishna had the 16 direct disciples, and so forth. So they attract very noble souls to them who are interested in one thing and one thing alone, the One, that non-dual reality, and they see it playing across the face and features and life of the avatar, and so they're actually there on the spot to take of it. And what attracts them, rather than the millions of people that get attracted to science, or the millions of people that get attracted to dualistic or fundamentalist theology, is that non-dual. And non-origination would be a word that could cap it all off, that if you seek origins, which you should, then you will look back inside and you'll find the prana and the ancestors, and further in you'll find the mind, the celestials, and the further back inside you'll find the gods and goddesses presiding over the celestials, and further back inside you'll find the rishis and the sages and the seers, where they keep their subtle bodies when they until a time when they will give them up and merge, because they still want to work with the other realms. And then further back inside you'd find what's called a trinity, and they're pretty much manifestations of the word itself, the Son, through which you get to the Father. So you've gone to an origin that's way back and subtle inside of us. Now it's even causal. And then you find through that aperture of the third eye, which is also very synonymous with the sound of Om, you pass through that and you enter into Brahman. And there you find everything is originless. That time too is not linear, as we were saying, but it's all one moment. And the appearance of rising and falling is in it. Just like an ocean is one ocean, and the appearance of its waves rising and falling don't change the ocean. They just change its surface appearance. So everything is infinite. Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamadachite, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnameva Vashishyate. That's at least 7 or 8 mentions of the word Purna, which means full. Everything is full. The finite is full, the infinite is full. It's just that the finite is the changing full, and the infinite is the unchanging full. And that's what you get by seeking origins, and you'll come to a standpoint called non-origination, which, by the way, is the main teaching of that 12 sloka Upanishad I mentioned in the first half. Gaudapada's treatise, or Karika it's called in Sanskrit, on non-origination. It is really, if you want to know what Advaita is, that's the word that describes it best. No origins to anything. And that means Maya, no beginning, middle, and end. Nature, no beginning, middle, and end. The soul, no beginning, middle, and end. And Brahman especially, no beginning, middle, and end. Although Shankar would aver one other change to that. He would say, yes, Maya does have an end in liberation. So he would put that, insert that. But still, it goes on for others. They still remain in Maya, unawakened. So in that way, it has this ever-present and ever-flowing effect. The stream of souls going towards enlightenment, and the stream of souls by the hundreds and thousands going to bondage again and again. That vision has been had by several great avatars of seeing souls. Buddha had it, Christ had it, Ramakrishna had it, and they described it. Lord Kapila was the first to have it in recorded history. He called it Koivaya Pragbara and Samsara Pragbara, ancient terms of these two streams of soul, mind streams that are going towards and away from freedom and bondage, respectively. So Pragbara means, if you roughly translated it into English, a dam. There's a dam of souls. And when that dam breaks, one gets free, and otherwise that dam is being constructed all the time to bind souls into Maya. They're binding themselves into Maya, just like the ancestors have bound themselves into heaven. And why the Vedantist, my teacher used to say, the Vedantist does not care for heaven, and it doesn't care for a post-mortem emancipation either. Not going to wait till after my death to get free. I'm free now. And so that would be non-origination, realizing that your soul, God, nature, and Maya all are unoriginated. It's a beautiful word. Actually, it's nice that we have an English word that can, in some way, relate Advaita to us. The other would be aparinama, no transformation. That there's no transformation in Brahman. And you can make a case for there's no transformation even going on in nature and in Maya by saying it's just an appearance. How can a thing that's unreal transform? You see? So if you've labeled Maya or nature unreal, and the wind is blowing things and your child is growing and so forth, you're looking at that and you say, that must just be appearance. The soul never changes. So it could very much be that Even nature is a parinama. Because something unreal can't change. Certainly something real doesn't change, but something unreal also, a case could be made for that fact. That constant change, like constant waves in the ocean, how can you assess them? Like millions of souls being born and being died this week and dying this week, you see. How can you assess that? How can you understand that? Plethora, that wave of souls that's rising and falling. The universal ocean of suffering, as we were saying, on one side, or the universal suffering, the ocean of bliss on the other, Ananda Sagar. So, look at some of these facets in the top block. You see, there are 4 entries. Science avers over here that the origin of consciousness, that consciousness develops in nature as body and mind evolve. That is, you're born, then the brain is there, and it develops, you get some intelligence, and then at the end, that intelligence is gone. You see, what happened to it? You know? Why did I even strive for it? If that's the case and I'm a materialist, then I should just remain an animal, you see, and be a happy animal, seeking pleasure. Theology, or Genesis, again, Christ didn't really mean everything to be based on Genesis. Genesis was explaining the stairs between the lowest step and the highest step. Genesis should explain that for you, called Origins. And yes, you should know that, but you shouldn't take that as the ultimate truth, because Brahman doesn't change, and Genesis is change, just putting it very simply. So consciousness is born in time and space and passes from state to state, theology says. State to state here means heaven to earth to hell. But there's no transcendence in that, of heaven and earth and hell. All worlds, both here and there, do I renounce. All heavens, all earths, all hells, all hopes, all fears. Thus cut thy bonds, is how Vivekananda put it. Say peace to all. From me no danger be to aught that lives. From those who dwell on high to those that lowly creep. I am the self in all. All worlds, both here and there, do I renounce. All heavens, all earths, all hells, all hopes and all fears. I'm done with them. I've cut my bonds. Now be thou calm. Say Tat Sat Om. You see, your final mantra you're left with. Mantra you could take into your afterlife, as it were. The demise of your body. Om Tat Sat Om, the last breath you breathe. Now, what does Vedanta say about that? Consciousness has no origin, being anterior to life and mind. That's a quote right out of the Mundaka Upanishad. Being anterior to life and mind. It happened before life and mind, if it happened at all. You can't really say consciousness ever happened because it didn't have an origin. It's always there. That's why they describe Brahman as all-pervasive, omniscient, as we were saying in the first half. Omnipresent. It's everywhere at once. It doesn't have to move because it's in everything already. Why would it have to move? Everything else has to move. We were saying, at the break we were recalling that Mother Kali, so sort of like the hound of heaven. Why can't Mother Kali find you and bring you enlightenment? Because you're running around too fast. If you stop and be still, she'll light on you. She can't find you in the race of humanity, you see, in your race of actions, in rajas, the gunas. She can't find you there, you see. Stop for a while. Go on a retreat. Somebody said, I went to a retreat yesterday, a one-day retreat. Well, 24 hours may help a little. You should probably turn every 24-hour period into a retreat. It can be the retreat of washing the dishes and having breakfast and so forth and so on. Or it can be a retreat to the most remote mountain retreat possible, see, in some Himalayan refuge. So Vedanta says consciousness has no origin. It pretty much cuts to the chase in that way. The next statement science would make, consciousness only exists in association with the mental organ. Theology would say consciousness is divided into many separate souls. Unfortunately, they're all made out of dust. But how can you create a soul, Vedanta says? Can a soul be created? Were you ever created? And what to speak of being created out of dust? out of matter doesn't ring true to me. The soul is acreate. That's a quote from Vivekananda. Brahman is acreate, and the Atman is acreate. So if it doesn't have a beginning or an origin, then it also was never created. It follows. So Vedanta says, consciousness is one indivisible mass, self-aware by nature. One indivisible mass means Chidgana. You see, they sing about that. Chintaya mama manasa hari Chidgana niranjana. Chidgana, a mass of indeterminable consciousness, and niranjana, stainless, pure. Kivanupama bhati mohana murati bhakta hridaya ranjana chintaya mama manasa hari chidgana niranjana. So it's one indivisible mass of pure conscious awareness, Chidgana. That's what you're meditating on if you're having a non-dual meditation. And it throws you into the Jada Samadhi at first. It stuns you. It's called stunned consciousness. That's what happened to Christ under the tree. Most of these great souls, you always hear about them in association with trees and mountains. They either go to the mount somewhere, or they go under a tree somewhere, and So he woke up out of Jada Samadhi, and he had grains in his hair, and birds had been pecking because he'd been sitting there like a statue for so long. How many days he sat, we don't know. We know Buddha was some 49 because someone reported on it. But how many days Christ? I get them mixed up and use the same words. Christ sat under the tree in the wilderness. When he went into the wilderness, we don't know, but. The snake slithered across his lap, and the lion laid down near him, and so forth. He was oblivious. Very interesting that Vivekananda had the same experience, and it's recorded by him in his own words. He said, I woke up one night, and I saw tiger tracks all around me. A Bengal tiger had evidently come and, checked him out. But, the yogi practices ahimsa, and what happens because he's nonviolent? He becomes not a threat to any other living being. And so the tiger didn't sense any fear there. So he didn't sense anything. Just looked at that body and, that's no fun. So he walked away. Even if I attack him, he'll just leave his body. Divine Mother rides on a tiger, rides on a lion. She's mastered those animal passions. So anyway, Chidgana, a mass of consciousness, when you first see it, puts you into a stunned consciousness. And that can be very, disorienting. Even Ramakrishna reported about some of his samadhis that he thought he was going mad. People were calling him mad, which didn't help. The madman at the Dakshineshwar temple, that runs around chanting Kali, Kali, Kali. But he began to suspect himself in these experiences he was having because he couldn't find them in the scriptures. Not even in the Indian scriptures, some of these samadhis he was having. So then Bhairavi Brahmani showed up, this tantric woman teacher. And he told her about his doubts, and she said, I can show you in the tantras this kind of experience. And she began counseling him and became his tantra teacher. Took a woman tantra teacher and came to understand the special nature of these experiences he was having. He just needed an adept to show him, that these experiences were had by other avatars. But not very many souls had them, so it was a matter of shocked consciousness. Jada Samadhi, that is a samadhi that's reported on and written in the scriptures. Jada means inert. It makes you inert. He said, I became like a stone, like a rock, like a ghoul, like a madman, like a child. He was explaining it that way. He just became totally inert. So Vedanta says Chidgana, it's really one mass of pure conscious awareness that is beyond origins. And as we go on here, consciousness, science says, calls it evolution. Consciousness is dependent upon the presence of matter and energy. Oh, so we're bound into the matter-energy process, you see. It seems like it would be the case. Maya makes it look that way because if we don't eat, we die. You can only fast so long. But man does not live by bread alone. So they've proven that they can go into a state of suspended animation and stop the organs from functioning, cut the breath down. You do that anyway tonight and you don't damage any of your brain cells. You go from 240,000 breaths a day to 120 at night. You cut it in half, and sometimes you go into a state where 5-10 minutes you're in deep sleep, you don't breathe at all. Yet nothing happens to your brain cells. That's the big fear, right? It's like people saying, oh, if I sit like this and my leg falls asleep, will I lose the use of my leg? No, you'll lose attachment to your body and its pain. See, you'll get beyond it. That will shoot me away from my body. I don't think I want to go to my knees anymore. I think I'll just stay in a state of destruction of pain. So Krishna says in the Gita, in this beautiful chapter, let that disassociation with the soul and the mind from the body and its pain be called by the name yoga. Let it be called that. It's the disassociation of the mind and soul from the body and its pain. But whole ideologies are being built around treating pain, as if it were real. See, medicines are being given, therapies are being given, retreats are being given that aren't about the soul at all. They're about how to get out of your pain. I have a way. They had a way. Well, theology says about that same point, consciousness depends upon creation and a creator. So it goes a little bit step further than, as far as origins goes, than science does. Science will only go to the origin of the Big Bang or something like that, matter. But theology will take the step and it will go back to the creator. Problem with the creator in Vedanta is that everything is not originated, right? So everything cannot be created. There's no such thing as creation, there's only projection. A creation it can't be real, you see. You can't create anything because it always was. Nothing new under the sun, you see. So it was always there. So therefore, Vedanta says, consciousness is ever free and transcendent of creation. So that means if you want to be realized of your true nature, you're going to have to transcend nature. Get a divorce. Isolate yourself. What else is sitting under a tree alone for days about? Or going to a mountaintop about? Isolate yourself. Go solo. Well, moving on, consciousness here under the science evolution says consciousness and the form are indiscernible from one another. Matter, we're matter. Even our thinking process is matter. Well, I could agree, if you look at most people, they're thinking only about matter. But most people haven't taken up the mysteries of the mind yet. Memory particularly. Memory is an amazing thing. Smriti, it's called in my tradition. The reason you're not matter is and that the soul cannot be a material thing is because you have memory of being in samadhi back in you. You have memory of being with Christ back inside of you. You have memory of being with Lord Buddha back inside of you. You have memory of that which is anterior to life and mind. You have witness of your own birth and death, a memory of that back inside of you. How many times you died, how many times you were born again. All of that is inside of your memory. So memory isn't just, my sentimental photographs and things, you see, of a worldly person, but it's these very powerful memories back inside of you. I was saying in my spiritual director's message, so that you'll see in the new Mundamala, our SRV newsletter is coming out. Look, has fashioned that really well. In the spiritual director's message, I said, I've been thinking lately about this, and spirituality is not an acquired taste. It's a memory. That's how I put it. It can't be an acquired taste, because that means you would have to discover it anew. But you come from that. So it's a memory, as far as you're concerned, until you get enlightenment. Spirituality is a memory of what's back inside of you. And all you need to do is prick that memory, go back and stab it, that balloon memory, and let it release it. Release the Jnanamatra, the intelligent particle, and let all those memories come flooding forward. With it, Krishna says in the Gita, will become a memory of all your lifetimes. The yogi will have to look at all the lifetimes at some point in that enlightenment process. We'll see them laid out like on a graph. It's called the Akashic record. And if you don't have a pranakasha in your theology, in your ideology, then you're not going to go looking there for this memory. See, it doesn't exist to you. Prana doesn't exist. You can't explain why the eyes see, why the ears hear, why I'm speaking intelligence, why I can speak about things that are back inside of the memory that other people have forgotten. Like I've been saying about nihilists, people who believe that there's nothing but a void, come out of a void, go into a void kind of thing. Well, there's no void right now. We somehow avoided the void when we came into life, see? Besides, we have a word for it. In order to have a word for the void, somebody must have seen it. So who was that witness that saw the void? Tell me, see? That was Christ under the tree, and Buddha under the tree, Muhammad under the tree. They saw the void and they laughed at it. I'm full. Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamadachyate. Everything is full. Everything is non-originated. Therefore, what happens to my fear? You see, when I have a realization like that, when I analyze things, you see, back to their origins and their evolutes, what happens to my fear? It goes away. Abai, bade pran shopechi, ami abai, bade pran shopechi, ami arki, and so forth. Get out the chords. Abai means fear. I have planted the seed of Kali in my heart. She's grown into a tree. And when death comes to me, I open my heart and show him the Kalpataru inside of me. Kalinam Kalpataru Hridayeropan Shopechi. Kalpataru, she's the wish-fulfilling tree in my heart. I open up my heart, show death that, he runs away in fear. I have made fear afraid of itself. I put death in its own grave, which is some of the last words my teacher spoke to me. Make doubt doubt itself, make fear afraid of itself, and put death in its own grave. And you'll be fine. Now, get enlightenment, we can compare notes later. Be about your father's business, or your mother's business. Let's look at this last entry. Consciousness and form are indiscernible from one another. We just said that. How does theology look at that? Consciousness is born in the form. Vedanta says consciousness assumes form but remains ever formless. I think I prefer that as a way of thinking. I came from the formless. I took form, and then I went back to the formless again when I was done with the form. And you know, in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, some Jehovah's Witnesses came to our door the other day and said, listen to some slokas out of the Gita. And he said, if you look out of the Bible, and we said, okay, if you listen to some slokas out of the Gita. In a better world. Consciousness assumes form but remains ever formless. So you started out as formless. So in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, because that's what reminded me of it, the Jehovah's Witness said, can we read from the Gospel? Have you read the Gospel? And I said, yeah, and I got the Gospel of Ramakrishna and I showed it to them. Assumes form but remains ever formless. So in the Gospel, Sri Ramakrishna says, my most mature opinion is... Oh, everyone goes to that page. There's a lot of pages there. It's thick. He says a lot of things. Holy Mother said, Sri Ramakrishna said hundreds and thousands of things, and they were all true. But when he comes to say, this is my most mature opinion, everyone all of a sudden opens the book to that page. What is Sri Ramakrishna's most mature opinion about important subjects like that? It's that a man, a soul, starts from the Nitya, descends to the Leela, and goes back to the Nitya. So if you have knowledge of those Sanskrit words, if you're Akamai a little in Sanskrit, then you know Nitya means eternal, and Leela means sport, sportive play of consciousness. Notice how he didn't say anything about the Maya. Man doesn't come from the Nitya, go to the Leela, and then descend into the Maya and get cut there. See, for thousands of lifetimes. That's not his most mature opinion. You come from the eternal, formless nature, and you sport, and you give up the form. And the whole time you're doing that, nothing's happening. You're dreaming. It's just that some dream very nice dreams, and some visit Nightmare Central, see? And some go into a mixture of those two, good and bad dreams, an amalgam. So his most mature opinion, consciousness assumes form, but it remains ever free. In fact, even when it assumes the form, it's free. That's what the word jivan mukta means. We have a word like that so that we know that there's such a thing as a living, liberated soul who's in the body. And I brought a chart on that, which we'll never get to today, you see, about the living, liberated soul, the jivan mukta, and all the things we could say about it. You see, all the things that Vashishta said about him in the earliest time, all the things that Shankar said about him at 700 AD, side by side. We'll look at it in another series. Now, that's all about the origin of consciousness, which is a misnomer in Vedanta, as you can see. There is no origin to consciousness. Let's take the origin of human beings next, this bar. Science says all beings are inseparable from nature. Ouch. There's a song Ramprasad Sen sings in one of his beautiful bhajans. He sings, they give themselves to the illusion of finitude. They think themselves to be the body, and the body is made of 5 elements, and the 5 elements are the essentials of nature, so actually they think they're nature, so they're giving themselves to death, decay, destruction, and then rebirth and life and growth again. You have rebirth, you have birth, you have growth, and then you have life, you see the first 3, and then you have decay, disease, and death, the other 3. 6 transformations, Buddha said, called them. 6 billows actually called them, like clouds. We call them the 6 transformations in Vedanta. So they give themselves to the illusion of finitude. They think themselves to be the body, so you're giving yourself to death, again and again. And you don't even remember how many times you've died. Probably till it's upon you. This seems familiar. My heart's racing. Even decrepit old people with pain. Oh, I don't want to give up this body. Why not? How freeing it's going to be. I mean, I've been around old people. And when they were passing. Well, Vedanta has something to say about the origin of human beings. All beings are non-originated and inseparable from reality. So it's not a matter of original sin or eternal damnation. It's a matter of eternal perfection. You come from the perfect, from the nitya. You come down to the imperfect and play with it a little. And then you return to the perfect again. And the whole thing is perfect. You can never be separate from your Divine Mother. Sense of separation is the subtlest of all barriers. Sense of ownership first, sense of agency second, sense of separation third, in gradated order. First you think, I own, I have, this is mine. You give that up. Then you say, I act, these actions are mine, and I will get everything by these actions. You give that up. Then you find out the whole thing was based on, I'm separate from God. I'm separate from you, from my brother, from my sister. This nation is separate from that nation. This religion is separate from that religion. And it's all compartmentalized. And it's all going to hell in a handbasket as quick as that, you see. And the minute you start breaking down those barriers, no matter how much resistance there is to that, then you have concrescence. It's a nice English word. Concrescence. Amelioration. Whoever's named Amelia in the room, you have a nice name. Amelioration, making things better. See, making things, showing the natural inherent oneness in things. Healing, if you will, these rifts that are caused by separations. Swami Vivekananda used to say, my teacher, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, used to say, words like Hinduism, Christianity, and Mohammedism are barriers to realization. They have to be broken down. So we could jump to a conclusion there, but Vivekananda himself clarified the Master's words. He said, we want to go beyond the Quran, beyond the Bible, and beyond the Upanishads, but not by throwing them out, by incorporating the Quran, the Bible, and the Upanishads. Those are the secret of the scriptures. You have to have them there as a foundation. You don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, or throw out your whole plate of food just because you found one hair in it. So Vedanta comes, I think, and states the truth. You're inseparable from reality. That you ever thought yourself to be separate was called the ego. And if you're talking about origins, you can go very back deep inside of yourself in the kingdoms of heaven before you find that ego. Before you find that moment where you separated yourself out from Brahman and called yourself by a separate name and defined yourself by a separate form and took a separate family and became separate from your brothers and sisters. All a mental act that stained your life. Well, the avatars don't come that way. They found Christ at 14 on the steps talking to the Jewish rabbis. Where did you go, son? His father said. Where should I go? I'm about my father's business. He left. Ramana Maharshi was supposed to have left very early on, his parents. Just disappeared one day. Little boy just walked off. What would cause a child to walk off? Did you ever leave home when you were a child? I'm leaving home. You're all mad at your parents. About an hour later, you're back. See, it's cold out there. Feel sorry for me. So, what causes a soul just to abandon society? Some memory. It's not an acquired taste. It's a memory. It hit him. Like a soft wind at the end of a hard fist, it hit him. So let's take the next one. Science says, the lives of all beings are based upon the real existence of matter. They think matter is real, even though science itself has shown it to be empty. Basically, all vibrating particles changing at a billionth of a second. They can't make a conclusion yet that it's empty and give it up. Theology comes along a step ahead and says all beings are separate from and conceived of by a creator. So you're a conception in the creator's mind. Did I jump something? No. Then Vedanta says all beings are non-originated, and human beings who are really unborn engage in dream life. So here's the Leela. You come from the nature to the Leela. This is a very good dream you're having, but if it descends to the Maya, that's a very bad dream you're having. Mass collective mental dreaming is what's going on, from the Trinity all the way down to the animals and insects. Because you can dream yourself to be a moth, by the way. People laugh, you say, oh, reincarnation, they believe in reincarnation, they think you can be a moth. Sure, you can be a moth. You're a moth in your dreams sometimes, and you're flying towards a lamp. See? It's all a dream, so you don't have to take it so damn literally. See? If you take the scriptures literally, you get into trouble. And a lot of it is symbology. The truth, you should take that literally. I would like to see people give up taking the scriptures, the dualistic scriptures, so literally, and start taking the truth Christ spoke literally. That would be a nice change. Science says human beings are of the nature of matter and have no soul. I've been having conversations with people who think there's no soul, who are materialists. Theology says all beings after conception live on earth, go to heaven or hell. Am I jumping around?
Yeah.
Sorry. Human beings constitute many souls, all restricted to one lifetime. Okay. So science says human beings are of the nature of matter and have no soul. Theology says human beings constitute many souls, all restricted to one lifetime only. And pardon me. What happened to those people who never met Christ or heard of Christ? How are they going to get saved? I mean, he was born at year 0, right? What about all the souls that were pre-Christ era? Were they damned? They only had one lifetime. That was it. They never met Christ. They will never meet Christ because they don't have another lifetime. Am I missing something here? I mean, tell me if I am. This doesn't make sense. Not even symbolically, what to speak of literally, it just doesn't make sense. Vedanta says human beings are really one birthless, deathless soul. They're not created, they're not conceived, they're not even a soul. They're an Atman. They're Buddha nature. They are the truth walking around on 2 legs. They just have to realize it because they fell into a dream and think themselves other than who they really are. Wake up from the dream, that's spiritual enlightenment. Souls have done it, by the thousands, really. The last one here, intelligence is energy and is formed by experiences in matter. Theology says, intelligence is God-given, associated with secular knowledge. And Vedanta says, intelligence is inherently spiritual and of the nature of sentiency. Here we find the distinction between the insentient and the sentient. Nature being insentient, the soul being sentient, and one coming out of the other. All of nature has come out of you. We're not 2 separate realities, in other words. And this was the contention Vedanta had with Samkhya Yoga in the early time, because they were talking about Purusha and Prakriti being separate realities. Vedanta had to come along and say, pardon me, there can be no 2 realities. They would cancel each other out. There has to be only one reality. So it must be that nature came out of the soul, and they are one. But the difference in the oneness is that one's insentient and the other is sentient. In other words, nature is your projection, and a projection cannot be real. You might have noticed if you're watching a movie and a projector is projecting something on the screen, and bombs are going off, and pathos is, people are crying and stuff. Projection goes away, movie's over, you go up the screen. Explosions didn't cause one rip in the screen. The screen isn't wet from any tears. It was a projection. That was all. The backdrop was not affected in the least. That's the way Brahman is. The backdrop to all your experiences, doesn't matter what the experiences are, it won't change. And the projection is not real. And wake up for that dream projection. The dream projection of evil and the dream projection of good. Wake up from them both. Go beyond them both, sannyas and bold. Say Om Tat Sat Om. As nobody said. One's a gold chain, one's an iron chain. And one binds you just as well as the other. So go beyond them both, sannyas and bold. Say Om Tat Sat Om. Go to freedom. We have just enough time to finish this chart. Origin of nature, worlds and objects comes next. So you can see what I've done here. I did some deep thinking on it and some research into these. Vedanta is really my field. I don't know a lot about science, but I've looked into some books and of course theology. I was raised in Christian theology, so I know some about that. And I know the main points. So I put them side by side together across the board, but also figured out the three most important things that they would have opinions on. One is origins, or Genesis it's called. One is origin of human beings, and the other is origin of nature, worlds and objects. Let's see what science says about that. Nature is the only reality and is formed by the force of energy. Say Big Bang energy. Let's give them that right now. Next, across the board, theology says nature is created by the Word of God via the creation theory. Genesis. That is a sigh of relief, in theology to me. They have some idea about the Word, an origin that Christ was trying to tell John, and John couldn't get it. So go to Gethsemane and meditate, because if you don't know about the Word, you don't know how all of this came into being through vibration. The Tantra says thousands of years prior to Christ, along the Indus River, they knew about the Word, and they used it as the very foundation of their religion. So by the time the Vedicists came into India, probably as a gentle incursion, they borrowed that from the Tantrasists, most likely, and the Word became important in the Vedas. So both the Tantras and the Vedas have this very deep relationship, love relationship with the Word, because it explains origin from the root on down. From the beginning on down. In the beginning was the Word. In other words, Christ must have known about that or heard about it and thought about it and given us that beautiful teaching and tried to give it to the apostles. Many who were kind of simple fishermen. They weren't Gyanis, see, like Shankara had in 700 AD. So, the creation theory, if it's connected to the Word, then we can give it credence and learn from it. But Vedanta says what? Nature is an eternal with no beginning, middle, and end. As we were saying, non-origination applies not only to Brahman, not only to the human being, but also to nature. It's eternal. You'll never find an end to it. Or if you find an end to it at the end of 4,320,000,000 year cycles, that end will have a beginning. It's called a new yuga, a new Mahayuga, a new Manvantara. Those are incredibly long periods of time, much longer than 4,320,000,000 years science. These Mahayugas are longer. And lo and behold, they find as a witness, when those long periods of Mahayugas go by, that what happens when it's apparently a void that you're trying to avoid is unmanifested Prakriti. Everything goes back into abeyance and is held there in seed form. This is very profound and esoteric stuff, but Ramakrishna put it this way. The old woman walks along the beach, and she has a jar every day, and she collects a little broken glass, a few shells, some sea foam. See, and she takes it home and pours it into a larger bowl, you see, and she's got this whole collection of beach flotsam and jetsam. That's the end of his story. What's he mean? She's collecting things for the next creation. She's holding parts of the beach back in abeyance, isn't she? In her own collection. This is the mother of the universe, this old hag. Walking along the beach, you see. And she's picking up bits of it and storing it away from that. And when the beach and the ocean both go away, she's got this collection, and she'll strew it in the universe, and the next long cycle of time will come out made from that. And that is called unmanifested prakriti. We don't know that nature has an unmanifested side. We think it all goes to death, to destruction. Or it never existed in the first place. See, what we don't know is what the Vedantists and Tantricists and yogis have known from time out of mind, is that nature goes into abeyance. I can't think of any other word. Into potential. There's another word. Into potential. It's formless nature. Formless matter. We don't know about formless matter. Although science is beginning to look at black holes and things. But they're finding a formless matter that's physical. What we're pointing to is a formless matter that's spiritual. That is at the foundation of non-origination. That is eternity. Great secrets. The Tantricists called this Shrishti Rahasya, the secret of creation. This is it, the secret of creation. It explains the word, what Christ was trying to explain to John in Genesis. And Genesis. So this is what Vedanta says. Nature is eternal, worlds are eternal, objects are eternal. They're just the changing eternal, that's all. They're insentient eternal. Science also says worlds, species, objects evolve over a vast expanse of time. Evolution theory. Theology says worlds and objects are real and are formed in a 7-day cycle. Here's where science is more of a friend to us than theology is, as my teacher used to say. He didn't like taking the theology literally. You see, he liked the idea science was doing something to pierce through this veil of Maya, to get deeper knowledge. Well, Vedanta says worlds and objects are forms and projections of the mind in Maya. That is, the mind in enlightenment will not do that, but the mind in Maya will project. And there are billions of minds in Maya. And one cross-section of them is called your ancestors, and they're projecting heaven. And one cross-section of those is called humanity, and they're projecting this world, and they're keeping it together with their projection. And one cross-section is called the celestials and the angels, and the ancestors are looking up or into them, and they're holding a cross-section of that huge projection, that huge cosmic projection. And it's a layer cake again. The cosmos, the kingdoms of heaven within. When Christ said, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. When Christ said, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven and all else will be added unto you. When he had all these statements, he was talking about things that were this side of Brahman. He was talking about relativity as compared to reality. Talking about grand conception as, or call it becoming, as opposed to being. Brahman is pure being. All of this is becoming. See? So we look at and inspect it deeply. Last time I showed this chart was to a group of teenagers, and they were blown away. They were blown away. Most of them had been raised in a Catholic school in that room. And it made a deep impression on them, and I was very happy about that. I want to see the American youth and the Americans in general look at this. They don't have to accept it. They just have to look at it, because it's going to open up doorways. The penultimate entry here, science says, matter and energy are real and their permutations are actual. They think transformation is real, that there's real change going on. Chemistry is based in that. Oh, let's put this and that together. We'll call it an atom bomb. Set it off. We really like to stand back and watch this happen, you see. Let's get far away with glasses in a bunker. Set off our first bomb, you see. Because it's a transmutation of energy, you see. What'll happen when we do that? They're fascinated with that. They still are. Just ask some of those poor Micronesian islands out there that don't exist anymore. Or ask our environment. Ask the gods of our environment. So they're fascinated with that kind of thing. Theology says via transformation the spirit becomes flesh and matter. Okay. Now I'm siding more with theology here than with science. You see. Yes, the flesh can become matter, and the spirit can become flesh, as the Christian teachings say. In Christ it did so. But that's becoming, right? It's not being. That was the transmutation. That was parinama. That was transformation, wasn't it? When Christ transformed himself into a body. Was that actual? He's not here anymore. Not in the body. So that must have been non-actual. It was an illusion. This form was an appearance. It's here and gone, like every other form. But it comes back again. So it must be eternal. The eternal and the non-eternal. Om Nityo Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. You are the eternal in all non-eternal things. Chetanas Chetananam. You are the intelligence of the most intelligent ones. The Upanishads have dozens, hundreds of slokas to explain these very things. This is why I know about them, why I can put it together and talk about it, because I've studied the Upanishads. Every page is pointing to one of these three subjects and giving you elucidation. Clarification. If you like clarification, go to the Upanishads and strip yourself of all Western ways of thinking. Or better them. In the case of science and some theological precepts, better them. Vivekananda said, you go from good to best to better. Vedanta says all transformation is non-actual, there is but one unchanging reality. Funny how every time we go to the Vedantic category, I hear Om in my head. I hear agreeance. It's just said so specifically and so economically. All transformation is non-actual. So you asked what Advaita was this morning. I was thinking, wait to the class. Because you have two axioms now of Advaita Vedanta that are pillars. Maybe two of three. One is that one I just talked about, that non-origination, ajati vada. And the other is aparinama, non-transformation. If you could explain the axioms of Advaita, those two words would come up in Sanskrit, and you would connect them to the birthless, deathless nature of the soul. Because birth and death are transformations that you never go through, you just dream them. That's why you keep coming back, keep dreaming. So, O mind, awake, awake, you must, you must. The song starts out singing, you must, you must. Don't you know that all students who don't study and learn are spanked soundly and put to bed without dinner? That's the second line of the song. I was going to spare you that. But the last entry here in science, matter and energy are interchangeable and proceed out of a void. Stretching it a little bit there, but that's some of the quantum physics and where they're reaching. They haven't really proven a lot of this yet, but they're very intrigued by that. Theology says nature is at first non-existent, then has a beginning when it gets created out of nothing. Oh my God, created out of nothing. Can we at least be practical here? Nothing doesn't exist. It just goes into unmanifested state. You're the same as nature in that way. When you drop this body, you'll go back to your soul, and that's an unmanifested thing. Nature does the same thing. When it drops its form at the end of a cycle, then it'll just go back to the thought tree, to the thought stone, to the thought city, to the thought cup. You can destroy the clay cup, but you can't destroy the thought cup. Try it. You might do it for a little while, and all of a sudden you'll think, that's like a cup of tea. Right? You both like tea. And the thought cup comes back, you see. It's got its use. So I can sing you more Shankara verses, Bhaja Govindam, Mudamate, about that. See? Man renounces the world, man sits under a tree, man tries to concentrate on Brahman, but he can't get rid of his thoughts. It's one verse, basically put. They write songs about this in the East. Their lyrics are like that, about topics like this. Ooh, baby, come on, doesn't occur to them. Twist and shout doesn't occur to them. Vedanta says nature has two modes, manifest and unmanifest. Well, it has to go to the qualified non-dual, doesn't it? Because you're talking about nature, worlds, and objects. You can't speak Advaitically when you talk about that subject very well. The former rises from the latter, but both are transitory. Reality transcends them both. Here's a Triputty. You've got name and form. See, or in this case, you have manifested and unmanifested. But there's also the supremely unmanifested. Read his lips. Sri Krishna says in the Gita, I will show you my eightfold nature, 5 elements in mind. He puts it very simply for us in the earliest times. That's my manifested nature. 5 elements means trees and ocean, because those are all made of water and earth and air and so forth. They're all a combination of the 5 elements. All objects are. More of one, less of another. Read your Panchadasi. See? But then there's the unmanifested side of nature. You see the thought tree, the thought cup, the thought ocean, still existing. But what transcends them both? So Krishna says, here's my manifested nature for you, the 5 elements plus the mind that they came flowing out of. He's not saying the mind and 5 elements are somehow separate. They have a connection. You might have noticed earth, smell, water, taste, fire, sight, air, touch, ether, hearing, right? Have you made those connections yet and meditated on them? Because if you haven't, you've got a scattered mind and you don't know what's what. The first exercise in yoga is to connect your senses with the elements. If you really want to be one with nature, as the New Agers are saying, or eventually be able to transcend nature after knowing it, as the Vedantists would be saying, then you have to make those connections. Then you find out that those 5 are connected back to the mind, or those 10 are connected back in the mind. So there's my manifested nature, manifested Prakriti. You should know, Arjuna, that I'm going to tell you about my unmanifested nature now. Virtue, vice, pleasure, pain. He goes on and lists a whole bunch of different things that exist in the mind, characteristics. So there's manifested nature, there's unmanifested nature. One comes out of the other, but reality transcends them both. There is a supremely unmanifested nature, and I call that me, with a capital M. You see, that is me. I did all that. Manifested and unmanifested nature exist in me. Who else? Where else would they exist, you see? There's a sentient being out of which the insentient comes. It can't just come by itself. You can't get something out of nothing. It comes from somewhere. And that somewhere is your own mind. So, a trip through Vedanta theology and science. A class, if you will. A class that's not for slouches. It's for deep thinkers. And I ask you to take it, ponder it. You can look back on these live streamings and push the pause button. See? I'll see that chart now, thank you. Compare it. So in the 10 minutes remaining, I'll use a couple of them to close with some nice sentiments like this.
Mati gati vardana kali balmardana vishaya viraga prashari jada chitta chetaka bhavajala bevaka jaya naramana sachari jaya naramana sachari jaya purushottama anupama samyama jaya jaya antaryami karatara sadhana naraduta varana jaya rama krishna namami jaya rama krishna namami jaya rama krishna namami jaya rama krishna namami. Om Ishtapakaya Dharmasya Sarva Dharma Swarupine Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya Namo Namaha. Thank you all for your kind attentions today, and no live streaming next week here at the ashram, or anywhere I think, but the week after next, catch us from San Francisco, and the week after that from Portland, and come to our Wind River retreat and explore more of this with us in a more intensified situation than a 3-hour class. But you all did very well. Thank you again for your kind attentions. Aloha. Namaste.